an hour. I don't want to make sure it's turned off.
Just make sure it's
That'll take off. Yeah, I'll just be.
No worries. Okay, welcome everybody to the first event that we're putting on in the new year. Just a couple of quick announcements while our speaker comes back. Is anybody going to Ignite on the 16th, 17th? Ignite the tour? Oh, you're on the waiting list. Oh, there are so many people on the waiting list. I can't believe there's not enough spots in Excel. Just it's a little bit ridiculous. Well, I mean, for those of you that are going there, and for those of you that that end up coming off the waiting list and going there, we've got on the morning of the 16th, we've got a booth and we've got a couple of talks. One of them, if you missed a talk that we did on Azure Sentinel, which is the security scene which generates, processes all of the security telemetry from different Azure services and external services. We've got a talk on that. We've got a talk on the sort of bring your own ML part. We've also got some talks around Power BI as well, if anybody's interested. So we're in the main conference hall. We've got one of these unconference type things. So they're sort of short talks, very punchy and interactive. So if any of you do find yourself there, just look for us in the morning. The unconference session starts around about 11. I'll put this online, but to be honest, I didn't want to annoy anyone because literally everybody I've spoken to has been on the waiting list. So, but hopefully you'll get to come. So I do plan to get a good program together this year. We're going to go back to a more typical format that we had a few years ago, which is to intersperse talks every quarter, so that we have one Microsoft speaker speaking about all the new sort of roadmap things from a Microsoft perspective, a customer talking about end deployments and implementation, and then somebody from the community doing a community talk. So if any of you fall in any of these brackets and want to talk, then please come and find me at the end. I'm going to introduce our speaker tonight, Matt Bradley. Matt has kindly made the journey from Manchester today, from a company called Clear Cloud. Sorry, I've been having problems all week pronouncing cloud. I'm totally in the wrong job. This is quite interesting because in some of the places that I work, a lot of customers, even though they're heavy users of Azure and this new polycloud phenomenon, they use Amazon Workspaces to access. So I'm quite excited to hear what Windows Virtual Desktop can offer us. So without further ado, I'm going to hand the mic over to Matt.
Thank you. Is the microphone on? Yeah, cool. So yeah, thanks Richard and Andy for organising this event and for everyone coming down as well. As you can see by the title there, I'm from the Meetup group, this talk is going to be around Windows Virtual Desktop in Azure. So if anyone's got any questions during this presentation, do shout up. Richard's going to have a microphone because it's being being live streamed. So if you have any questions at any point, just put your hand up. Wait for Richard to come over the microphone, and then we'll get them answered as you go through. Before we get started, does anyone currently here use VDI at the moment? So quite a lot of people. Does anyone use Windows Virtual Desktop? Okay. Citrix? RDS? Do you use all three? Should we hand it for all then? Okay, cool. So part of what we'll talk about is we're going to talk briefly about Citrix and RDS as well, because it's good to have that comparison between what the alternatives are compared to Windows Virtual Desktop as well. So before we get started into the talk, I think it's always good to know who's talking to you. So I'm Matt Bradley. My main background is I've been at UK Fast, which is a server hosting company in Manchester. for around 8.5 years, working on their enterprise Windows team. So that was quite heavily involved with Windows workloads, so Hyper-V, VMware, storage, SQL clusters, high availability for SQL and web farms, things like that. And then about 2.5 years ago, UK Fast started a child company, ClearCloud. So rather than owning their own data centers, which is what they still do that, and being kind of like the wholesaler in the process, they realized that they should also be doing Azure and AWS support as well. So ClearCloud was set up to do fully managed support for Azure and AWS, which I've been doing about 2.5 years. So I do solution architecture, migrations, DevOps, consultancy with clients, things like that as well. If anyone does want to follow me on Twitter, that's my handle and the company's handle. I normally warn people, you probably tell by my accent, I do support Liverpool Football Club. So it's probably not as much of an issue down here. I normally warn people in Manchester because it sometimes makes people not want to not follow me. There are occasional tweets about football, especially at the moment. And I've done quite a few exams, as you can see at the bottom there, for them all. So what we're going to go through today is a general overview as to what Windows Virtual Desktop is. As I mentioned before, we'll briefly talk mainly about remote desktop services and Citrix as well as alternatives. The comparison between what you have to do for each one's, I think, quite important when you're comparing what platform you want to use. We'll go through the configuration options to show how simple it is to set up. So later on in the talk, I'll log on to Azure and go through the build process of this to show you how it actually works. It takes about 10 minutes to set up, so we probably won't sit there and watch things loading as it goes through. But we'll go as far as the review and create screen that you have in Azure. Does everyone here use Azure? I assume it's obviously Azure meetup group, yeah. Does anyone not? Excellent, okay. And then after that, we're going to go through some optimization options you have on there and a few ways to boost performance. So starting about talking about the platform first and then going through ways to optimize and boost performance. And then after that, talking about Azure NetApp files. That kind of falls under the performance side and optimization. But the way I'll talk about it's slightly different, so I've put it as a separate section on that. Oh. Yes, by the end of the talk, hopefully everyone will have a good understanding as to what Windows Virtual Desktop is, any advantages it may not have, and how you can kind of boost that performance a little bit on there as well once you've got the platform set up. So first part, what is Windows Virtual Desktop? You'll notice through this talk that the slides, it probably has the WVD listed rather than Windows Virtual Desktop, just because it's easier to type and it's less for you guys to read. But I think we're talking about how to optimize things, so it's good if no one's used it before or has an understanding of it to talk about what it actually is. So Windows Virtual Desktop is Azure's PaaS offering for desktop as a service. So as Richard mentioned before, the AWS workspaces, it's a similar kind of thing to that as to what you get as an end user. It went GA at the end of September 2019, so it's been GA a couple of months. But because it's obviously it's Azure, so it's Microsoft. The underlying architecture of it is based on Windows Remote Desktop Services with how it all works. You just get a lot of that taken away from you. So although it's only gone GA recently, the technology that's being used is by no means new, so I wouldn't worry too much about using it. One of the key parts about this is it's the only platform that offers a multi-session Windows 10 environment. So typically, if you've got any kind of VDI environment that you have in-house, your options normally are either give people a server OS, which you can have multi-session on there, which is good, but it's still a server OS. It's not a desktop OS. You can install the desktop experience well, which makes it a bit more user-friendly in that way, but it still is a server OS. If you don't use that at the moment with other VDI platforms, you would normally have, if you want a Windows 10, it would be a one-to-one, or Windows 7, whatever desktop. It would typically be a one-to-one. So one user would have one desktop. And that, obviously, that uses a lot of resource. If you have, the more users you have, the more resource that uses, both for kind of resource on the hypervisor it's on, if you have that environment, and also for the storage space as well. Obviously, for Windows, if every user has their own OS, that's going to be quite a lot of storage space if you have hundreds or even thousands of users that are using it. So yeah, this is the only platform that has this multi-session Windows 10. And it probably will be, because it's Microsoft who make it. So they want to make sure they have the USPs for it. So I think that the multi-session Windows 10 alone is a very important point. And if you have a large VDI environment, to a lot of people that might be enough reason alone to highly consider this as an option for it. There's also been a lot of optimizations for Office 365 done to this as well. Like most products you get in Azure, the Microsoft product teams work on those as well, so the integration kind of keeps getting worked on and things keep evolving within to make things a lot better. And we'll talk more about what these optimizations are in a short while, and how that can help you, again, save costs and give a better end-user experience. Okay, so yeah, before we carry on getting deeper into Windows Virtual Desktop, we'll quickly talk about the other options on there. Like most people here use some kind of VDI platform, whether that's Citrix or Remote Desktop Services, or more than one. So we'll quickly go through some of that. I asked about these first two at the start, because those first two are the most common. You can just about see the top one there, Windows Remote Desktop Service, Citrix. You might have KVM, FreeBSD. But typically the top two are they're the most common ones that you're probably going to use. So we're going to go through the architecture that you might commonly have for both of those, to kind of give you a visual for what the layout is, and then do the same on Windows Virtual Desktop as well. What you'll normally find with this is with the choice to choose between Citrix and Windows Remote Desktop Services. Some companies are either Citrix House and they'll do Citrix just because they like Citrix, and some will be Windows, so they'll do Remote Desktop just because it's Windows. From what I've found working with like many clients at UK Fast, is what you would normally have if you had a small number of users, so say 10, 20 users, 50 users, people would tend to go more towards the Windows Remote Desktop Services route, because it's a bit cheaper to do that. But it doesn't scale very well, Windows Remote Desktop Services. So if you're looking at getting a couple of thousand users, RDS, it can struggle a little bit with that. So when you start to get to more users, then Citrix becomes the obvious answer historically with between those two options. So Remote Desktop Services, if you've got RDS platform that you use at the moment, it might look something like this. So this is a diagram of a HA setup with your two gateways there, two connection brokers, SQL for the session information between the two, and then your back-end servers. So your gateway is typically low spec. You don't really need much for that. Connection brokers need a bit more, depending on the number of users you have because of the data that holds. And then the back-end servers, the session hosts, depends on what users you're going to use. But that's typically what you might look like for an RDS setup. Not really the downside of this, but one of the things that with this, because we're doing a comparison between this and Windows Virtual Desktop, is that's quite a lot of servers to look after. And this is the same with any, if you have your own infrastructure compared to any platform as a service offering, is all those servers need to be patched. You need to make sure SQL's patched as well. Depending on how big your database needs to be, there could be a license cost involved with that, which might be quite high. And so that alone, just to maintain and manage that, can can be a lot of work that, you know, it's work that's not difficult to do, but it does take time to do. Okay, so Citrix, if you've got Citrix, Citrix has got a few different ways to get things done, but this is one way you could do it. So again, there's a few different things here with any self-managed platform that you need to maintain just as an operating system level and patch level. With this, as opposed to RDS, is you've got additional license costs as well. So NetScales need to be licensed, end users need to be licensed for Citrix. You know, that could be £10 a month for each user, so it can add up. But the more users you have, you know, this does scale better than what Windows Virtual Desktop, Remote Desktop does. Okay, so that's past what other options you have available. So on the last two slides, you have to manage all that platform. So if you're using anything outside of AWS Workspaces, or most things outside of that, you've got a lot of overhead on that as a maintainer of the IT systems to make sure you do all that. With Windows Virtual Desktop, because it's platform as a service, all that management is taken away. So that's a little bit dark. When I did this slide, I thought my battery power was just running low. I didn't realize that was actually that grey in the background. So can everyone see that okay? Yeah, it's not the clearest, but you can see it. So I'll go through this now anyway. But what it basically does is all the infrastructure side of it, the management level of that is taken away. So in case anyone can't see it, all this top box here is managed by Microsoft. So web access, rather than having your own service for that, Microsoft takes care of that for you. Management, so if you're using RDS, desktop services, that could be a SCCM server, connection brokers, desktop gateway, you know, if you've got any monitoring service for it, and also load balancing if you have your HA set up for your brokers. All that's taken care of. So all you need to manage is the back-end servers for that.
Question. Are those like Azure EDS that actually have a couple of VMs hidden behind the scenes?
Yeah, so I'll just repeat that question just because it's being recorded. So the question was, is this like Azure Active Directory domain services where there are VMs there, you just can't see them? Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, that's the same with any platform as a service offering. You know, it all runs on servers. When you configure this, all of these roles, you don't see this in Azure. So you'll see a resource in your Azure portal for remote desktop, Windows Virtual Desktop, and all of that is included as part of that. So you don't pay compute costs for any of this.
It's slightly different, isn't it? Because it doesn't exist. Those bits don't exist within the virtual network, like domain services. So domain service you see as an entry. Is that what you mean within Azure? Whereas this, you don't actually see this. Yeah. If you deploy domain service or service environment like that, it takes up a subnet within your virtual network.
Yes.
The management bits there don't actually exist in your.
Yes. You don't see these in Azure. This is all just kind of taken care of for you. Obviously, the roles there do exist in the background to do this work. But yeah, absolutely right. So when you deploy your domain service, you see that in Azure, and you see the VNet used for that in Azure. You don't see this as these separate items.
So yeah, question. So are these logically separated from other customers, or are they shared services across the platform?
So
if we can't see them, how do
yes, yeah. So I believe this is a shared infrastructure, but it will be isolated for
customers are coming through the same, for example, gateway or
through the same hardware, but it will be separated off for you.
logic?
Yes, yeah.
But we don't know.
Sorry?
But we don't know. Because that's going to be a security question.
Yes, yeah. Because one of the problems you have with this is you don't see this. So most of Azure's platform as a service offerings they're quite cheap to run compared to run your own infrastructure. And that's because of a lot of its shared infrastructure that gets used for it, rather than having your own dedicated dedications for it. Whether it's completely dedicated, I don't know. I don't believe it is. I think it's shared but logically separated. I don't know if anyone here who uses this does know the answer to that question.
I'm trying to find the answer. No one ever answered the
Yeah.
container. It's actually
Yeah.
ADDS. It's a couple of VMs.
Yeah.
Multi-tenants.
Yeah.
I would like to know. Have you deployed it from scratch? And see how much more you need to do. You will be asking those questions if you want to deploy this in production. It will be. It's like the first time when Office 365 came by, and you were at Exchange admin.
Yeah, it's all fair enough. However, whenever you know what it is or not, your PowerShell approach will not change. Let's say Microsoft will tell you it's container. So what changed for you? Nothing. You still have the same PowerShell script. Microsoft.
Troubleshoot it, so I understand how it works behind the scenes. If I have a problem, I need to see interact with it, but it helps troubleshoot.
Once again,
knowing all your network stack.
it kind of makes sense if you will have access to backend logs, which we don't. And the only way to do so to ask Microsoft to basically give it for you. In this case, they will share like from where those are collected, but from management perspective, from deployment perspective, it's platform as a service. So you consume as an end user. Like your users that you serve, they not really know how Exchange operates. They know that emails come into Outlook. As simple as that.
Yeah, so that again, that's one of the issues you get is people often ask that question, is this dedicated to me or shared? It's hard to find that answer out. But typically what you have is a lot of it is shared, but you'll have things logically separated for you. I guess what you would normally have as a consideration for this is if it was a shared platform, say you had an on-prem platform or in a data center platform, which was shared, one of the concerns might be with it being multiple people going through there, or multiple companies going through there, is if they're getting a lot of traffic through, could that affect you? If they get compromised, could that affect you? The size of the platform that you have for things like this is so big, typically you don't get those same issues anyway. The separation on there for security is pretty good in Azure. And if someone gets compromised or gets attacked, I don't think that would affect you anyway, because the size of the infrastructure that Azure has there, I don't think that would be an issue in that way. Which is normally the concern people have is, what if other people affect me?
I think it's an organisational policy issue more than a technical one.
Which it can be as well.
People have a perception that it's in their own network, whether
Yeah.
it's owned by Microsoft or not, it's within their
Yeah.
control.
Yeah.
Whereas public services, like that, stuff like this.
So you do deploy this to a virtual network, which is your virtual network when it gets deployed. But that's your Windows virtual desktop environment.
Yeah.
Like I said, sometimes companies will dictate that they need to have dedicated equipment. And I think, although that's, from a security perspective, it's kind of good to have that. But my personal opinion of that is saying that we have to have our own, not share this all with anyone else. People might disagree with this. But in my opinion, it's a bit of an outdated idea. Yeah.
Objections these days.
Yeah. And you get obviously governments. It does, yeah. 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 Yeah.
There's lots of banks on public cloud that do that total dichotomy going on, that we want this and this, and we can't exist together.
Yeah, so that's a really good point, is you go into public cloud, right? It's public. That's the key word in that term. And,
It's not accepted.
it's not. It's getting,
Know how to answer that.
yeah. And a lot of that comes down, a lot of it really comes down to security, people's belief in the security on there as well, as part of that. And 5 years ago, 6, 7 years ago maybe, that was a very common mindset to have, is we can't go to public cloud because it's not secure. And that was the answer you got from a lot of people. That's now just going away. Governments use this. You've probably seen in the news recently to do with Pentagon going to Azure rather than AWS, and Jeff Bezos had a
I've
kick
used
up.
that argument
Yeah,
half a dozen times.
yeah,
It doesn't fly a lot.
yeah,
So it'd be nice to have a proper response from Microsoft.
yeah,
I mean, I'm all in,
yeah,
but
It's
You open a back door for people to compromise your system. So what you're asking is basically to compromise the environment for you to give someone confidence.
I don't think that's what I'm asking at all.
I think it's just asking for a sort of little bit of clarity from Microsoft to make it easier for him to explain how to sell their solution.
Technological clarity is an attack vector, which allows you to formulate attack properly. So if you know how it's running in the background,
So this is all part of the security valve
for
solution.
attack of the service.
Don't even give the name of the technology, then call it box hack.
It's amazing. It's a fact for us that it works.
so.
If I tell Ed, I can make you some magic tricks, I can make your phone disappear. And then I do it, and you go, oh yeah. Oh, I don't tell you what it does. Oh, it's magic. Then it must be real.
Yeah, if you will tell me that you will give me $1 million, I don't care how you do it. Like, I can take everything, right?
That's $500 million of real.
So, but it's a fine line between when you say, is this dedicated to me or to somebody else, because the entire Azure network is shared. You don't get dedicated equipment just for you on there. If you've got a virtual machine running, that's on a Hyper-V host with loads of other VMs, right? So you've got your logical separation of your virtual machine with the network on there. But you know, people still put VMs in Azure. They don't say it's a shared host. People just accept that's how it is. If you use web apps, you know, that's going to be, unless you go onto your private, your P version of web apps, that's going to be on a shared host as well. So most things you have are shared, and most things you have in here are logically separated most of the time. And so, you know, in my opinion, if you're going to have VMs and web apps and other things which are clearly on shared platforms in some way, this isn't that much different, really. But I do get that people do have that concern. And, you know, I've had it a lot in the past. But I've dealt with quite a lot of kind of some governing bodies, some councils, education, things like that. And surprisingly, a lot of when they send through documentation to fill out, a lot of the forms they send in will be cloud first. Sometimes they don't even know what that means. They just put cloud first on there because they've heard someone else do it. And you get that with a lot of organizations, is when someone starts to do it, it's then like dominoes that other people start to follow because they say, oh, he's doing this, that worked quite well. So, you know, it is changing. I think it'll change more in the future. Yeah, you can kind of understand why people do think in that way, but I think it's a bit outdated, and especially the size of the platform you have here. It's not like you've got a small thing where a bit of traffic for someone else can affect you in that way. It's a different kind of mindset when you're trying to think about it. It's hard to get that across to clients, to end users, when you're going through. Thanks for the questions, though. Are there any more questions so far on this? Because the next part of demo, which should be fun. No?
Only one question is slide title.
Okay. Yeah, so apparently I copied and pasted slides and kept that as previous alternatives. This slide title is supposed to read Windows Virtual Desktop. So yeah, at least someone's reading and paying attention. Thank you. I'll get that changed before it gets live streamed. Okay. So the next part's demo. So this is what we said at the start. We've kind of talked about the different platforms you might have had before a platform as a service offering compared to what you have now at the kind of at a high level. If anyone's ever built a Citrix environment before or a real desktop service environment before, people here in Azure, they maybe use ARM templates, and maybe it's actually quite quick to do. But there's a lot of different parts you need to have there, a lot of things you need to consider for the isolation of things and how things are set up. So we're going to quickly go through the setup for Windows Virtual Desktop. Again, we're not, because it takes a bit of time to build, we're not going to go through the build for it. So I've just realized that opens on one of our clients' tenants. I'm going to just minimize that a little bit. Okay, so this is into my tenant now. So when you come to deploy this, it's a marketplace offering that you deploy Windows Virtual Desktop into. So it doesn't show in your main services list. So Windows Virtual Desktop, nearly spelled right, but it picks up on it. So you deploy through here, and we'll just go quickly through some of the options. Azure's really good at making things really accessible for people, and you don't necessarily need to know that much about the technology to be able to get this built. So you get all these information things which we'll quickly go over on the way round to show you what each part is as you're going through. So yeah, into a resource group. One thing you'll, in a few more pages across, you do need to deploy this into a virtual network and subnet that need to have access to your Active Directory environment because it needs to join those VMs to the domain as you go through for the authentication. So the region you choose here needs to be in the same region as your virtual network when that goes through, because otherwise it won't show in the drop-down list. So I've got some VNets in UK South rather than UK West, so I'm going to choose that for it. Give your pool a host name, so we'll call this Windows Virtual Desktop pool.
Sorry, quickly, does this work over Express Route?
So you
have a hybrid scenario.
you can use Express Route to connect into Azure for this.
Yeah.
Was that so? If you're on-prem for your end user to come in, so if you had
Express Route connection.
Yeah.
On-prem hybrid, scenario.
Yeah.
To UK West or whatever. It is. I think can clients, providing the routing's correct, clients then connect to Windows Virtual Desktop or Azure Virtual Desktop through the Express Route connection?
yeah.
Or does it have to come over the internet?
No, yeah. So the again, just because it's been recorded, the question there was, if end users have an Express Route connection from their on-prem or data center into Azure, can the connection for remote desktop services be made over that connection? So when you connect into remote desktop services, you get given a URL for that, which will go through.
DNS entry is not
Public facing, so it's public facing. The URL's coming up on a few slides to show what that looks like. But when you're accessing it, it's browser based. So you type URL into your browser, which comes up, which will show in a few slides. So I'm not sure where that resolves to DNS wise. I've never actually tried to do that.
Sorry, it doesn't really matter how it resolves. If you have configured your Express Route to serve your public endpoints in Azure, it will go to Express Route, if not, there is not.
Yeah.
As simple as that. I don't need to test it.
Oh, you don't? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's going to be, as long as it's hosted in Azure, which it's going to be, then that Express Route connection will work to get there as well. So the options you have here, this is, again, the TV's cutting the words off a little bit. So for the desktop type, this is, the options here are pooled or personal. So as mentioned before, where you have the multi-session Windows 10 environment, that's pooled. If you want a one-to-one, then that's personal. So
settings, is that ephemeral? Does it delete the user's profile or does it retain it on its board?
does it keep the user's profile on the virtual machine when they log on?
Yeah. Are the sessions static or they?
It will retain profile information on the servers. One of the things we're going to talk about in a bit is if you want to abstract that from the VM, where you can store those different profile disks. But what you have is a profile disk, like you will do on Windows Remote Desktop Services. So obviously, for you to log on, it has to have your session information in there. So if you go to see users, you're going to see your username in that. But other people on there won't be able to see your information.
Okay, so basically still extending onto a separate piece.
So by default, this will store your session information locally when you log on, like it will do a server. You can use remote profiles for it if you want to, and you can also store it remotely, which is one of the optimizations we'll talk about shortly. But you can store remote network share as well.
So the difference between pool and personal is only in terms of compute.
So it's do you want to have more than one person logging onto the one virtual machine, or do you want everyone to have their own virtual machine? Here, so part of the build that this does is it will, as with remote desktop services, when you create your pool of servers, you then have to allocate users to that to say who can see what resource in there. So when you create this, you can add your own users in there. So I want to be able to log on to this myself once this is live. Service metadata location. You can't change this. It's at the moment, at least, it's United States. That's all you have. With most, sorry. Yeah, again, metadata. So there's not much to it. If you deploy an Azure global service, so say if you use Azure Front Door, if you use Azure DNS, or those things that kind of span more than one region by default, a lot of time when you're selecting where to put that information, when you'll create that information, it will ask you for a location for it anyway, and it's just where the metadata stored. It's just a bit of data, and that's the option you have. So yeah, that might change. It's only been GA a few months, so in the future that may change. But at the moment, that's just what you get. So one of the good things with this as well, if you're creating a Citrix environment or an RDS environment, it's quite easy to find online how much resource-ish you might need for your end users based on what applications they run on there. So the docs page of Microsoft will say, if your users run Office, they'll need this amount of CPU, this amount of memory, this space per user. So if you can try and figure out how many users you want to have on there, you can try and build up in your head how many servers you might need, how much resource they may need. But if you don't know that, so if you're not an SA or you don't know where to go, you're not very good at Googling, you just don't know what it is, this page on here, based on what you enter in, so again, because these lines are through there, the top part of the user's profile is, again, it's a bit of a vague thing, but it's how resource intensive you think your users are going to be. So light, medium, heavy, or custom, and it uses this for the calculation of how many machines you might want to deploy. So for average users, if you're going to be using Office on there, keep it on medium. How many users in total you think you're going to have? So the number behind there says 100. So Azure reckons, based on that, 100 medium use users, it wants you to have, or it recommends you have, 4 servers with 8 vCore and 32 gig of RAM on there. That's what it estimates based on Microsoft's experience with that. And as you go up, so if you go down to light, 100 users, that goes down to 3 servers instead of 4. Up heavy usage, up to 7. If you've got 1,000 users, 32. So it does the calculations, and quite quickly as well, which is good. It's a good place to start. You might find when you build this that you need to have more or less resource, but it's better to somebody to say, I think you should have this, rather than you trying to guess it in your head and paying too much or users struggle. Because this is scalable, you give your VMs a prefix for the name. So Windows Virtual Desktop. Let's see, virtual machine settings next. So this is where you can choose where you want to get your source, your image from. As with all things in Azure, all virtual machines in Azure, it's VHD. So you can get that from a gallery, so that's a pre-built image from somewhere, if you have one available. You can get it from blob storage if you have a VHD stored in there, or a managed image as well, depending on what you want to use. For this one, I'm going to use, for the demo of going through these options, keep it on gallery. And when you look at your OS, you've got a few different versions on there. So although one of the benefits you have with this is using Windows 10 multi-session, in my opinion, that's one of the great things about it. You can have one that comes with 365 installed already, which is quite useful, quite common to have. If you don't want to have multi-session, you can just have non-Windows 10. And for some reason, if you want to have data center, you can do. I'm not sure why you would want data center for RDS. If you can have Windows 10, just have a server. If you're on a desktop, use a desktop OS. But it's there as an option anyway. So multi-session, disk types, you can choose as any normal VM. Here you need to create, because these machines join the domain as you do it, so you need to make sure the user you give here has the permissions to join the service to that machine. And it creates a local account with that name. So I've just realized, because we're not actually going to do this, doesn't matter what I type here anyway. So put that in there. Do you want to put in an OU, yes or no? So for the domain on this, this does natively work with Azure Active Directory, if you have that already. If you have some kind of hybrid setup, you can use your own domain for this as well. You just need to make sure that the users have permission. If you are using your own domain for this, Azure needs to be aware of it. So you need to have some kind of federation in place, password sync between them, or whatever you have with AD Connect to make Azure aware of what it is and have that communication open. And then virtual network. So this is the part that it needs to be in the same location.
The username password is just for the domain join, not for anything.
Yes. Yeah. You do enter more credentials on one of the other tab. But yeah, so this one, I'll just cover that back over that again. They're quite clear, Microsoft, with stuff like this as to the permissions it needs. So this part is literally for the domain join. When you build, when you click create on this, it goes through 4 stages that it shows what it's doing in the background. The last stage is join the domain, and it uses the credentials for that.
You shouldn't have to worry about using stuff during the network.
Sorry, you shouldn't have to.
Just wondering if there's something it's used for along the road. So.
Right. So you're saying if someone has this username entered here and they leave and they can't get disabled or whatever. No. So this is just used for this. But if my account got disabled, then yeah, that would stop working because the account you set up for this initially is used for that deployment. So that would need to be updated for that.
So that implies almost that it's joining an Active Directory domain.
It is.
It is.
Yes.
Joining.
Yeah.
Your on-prem Active Directory domain.
So it depends. So because for the authentication to work on the virtual machines, so if you've got your name, john@contoso.com, and you create a pool of Windows servers for desktop services, and they're not on a domain, then someone needs to go on and log on and configure or script out local users for each one, give you a username and password. The passwords could change, go out of sync. If you have Windows Remote Desktop Services, it's domain dependent.
What if you only have a cloud directory?
So you can use Azure Active Directory for it as well.
We need to have either ADDS.
Yeah, sorry, so this is a custom domain for Azure AD in my account. So this is not an on-prem. All of our work stuff's in 365. So what you just said then is absolutely correct. If you need Azure AD, but you also need Azure AD domain services as well.
That says Active Directory, Azure Active.
Which part, sorry? Was that this part?
Yeah.
It can be either. Yeah, it works with, so Azure Active Directory is
Sorry, let's make clarification. Azure Active Directory is a separate product. You can't domain join
I'm well aware of that. Thank you.
You
Yeah.
can't domain join anything to Azure AD. That's
But
why.
this is saying Active Directory domain join, which implies an on-prem Active.
Yeah.
Sorry, it doesn't imply anything. Active Directory is a product that can be executed either on premises on your own VMs or as ADDS. So it
You're an
doesn't.
angry fellow, aren't you?
I'm not angry. Sorry.
Yeah, so you are right. So Azure AD, it's Azure AD domain services is what you need because that's what you get the computer joined from rather than just the users. Yeah, it doesn't say Azure AD, it says Active Directory, but you can use Azure Active Directory domain services. If you're using on-prem and Azure is aware of that domain, you can use that as well for it. So when I've set this in the past on my own, this is a custom domain name in our Azure ADDS. Yes, domain services, yeah. So as you can see there, that's, you can't see there. These lines are in bad places all the time. The VNet there called ADDS, that's the one that, that shows because that's in the same location. And that's the one that is used for our ADDS on there. So you give it a, so you create give it the virtual network, something that it needs to exist in the same region. Every time, when I've tried this in the past, so it doesn't say this when you hover over it. If you try and, it gives you the option here to create new. Every time I've tried to build this in the past, multiple tenants, multiple subscriptions, and create a new one, it gives an error. I don't know if anyone else has had this as well or been able to go through this. It gives a, in fact, we can show you in a minute if we try and create a new one. So we'll call it VNet 1. It gives you an error to say that it doesn't, there's a policy in place to say it needs to exist. Which if you know how Azure policy works, the wording of the error kind of makes sense. If you don't know how Azure policy works, it's just a bit of an error and doesn't really tell you too much. Okay, so then you need to give your tenant a group, give your tenant a name as well. I've got that test. So you can either use a UPN or a service principal for it. If you use multi-factor authentication on the user account, you can't use a user account here. The user here, as that says, needs to be either RDS owner, RDS contributor within the tenant. So again, this doesn't need to be valid information because we're not going through that far.
I'm sorry, can we back up? So, so it's a tenant. We're creating a tenant.
Not an Active Directory tenant.
Right.
We're not creating one here.
So this has been a code there for a long time. What is a tenant? No, but is a tenant a directory? Is a tenant
Is there
a service? Is a tenant
the directory and tenant are basically the same thing?
well, you have an Office 365 tenant, you have an Azure tenant,
It's
you have,
all Azure AD,
now we have this
no,
tenant.
backend, it's all Azure AD.
Yes, the directory is the same, I agree, but what defines a tenant?
So a tenant is a Microsoft Online Services tenant. So you have a
Service tenant.
one-to-one relationship between Active Directory and a Microsoft Online Services tenant.
Okay,
At that point, so people talk about an Office 365 tenant. It's not technically correct. It's Office 365 running in your Microsoft Online Services tenant. Same Dynamics, same Azure,
And now this.
this is confusing things by using
Yeah. So if you, that's quite a valid point there, yeah, to do with the tenancy and subscriptions and things like that. Yeah, the wording is terrible there. If you think about, I can't draw on this, but if you think about like a hierarchy of stuff, so the top level, just one box, is a Microsoft tenant. So that's your .onmicrosoft.com username that you get when you join up, or you can have a custom domain, but onmicrosoft.com is the top one. And then below that, 365, alongside 365, the same level as Azure. And these are two independent services that both use Azure AD. So there's a relationship between those two, but the Azure is just a subscription. It's not a tenant. It just uses the Microsoft AD tenant, if that makes sense. Yes, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so you tenant related to your Microsoft.com domain.
The problem is an organization will ask, how many tenants do we have? And you can either describe it as tenants or services or, I mean,
Yeah.
Actually, your definition really helps.
But this, so what this says here is the credentials we're using here need to have RDS owner on the Windows Virtual Desktop tenant. So the RDS is a group within that tenant, so within AD.
A service tenant.
Yes, yeah. So it's kind of permission within the tenant that Windows Virtual Desktop resides in. Are there any more questions so far? Okay.
Are you allowed to shoot customers who have their own concept of a tenant?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, do shoot them, but if anyone asks, say it was educating them rather than shooting them.
Yeah.
No,
Usually they have like,
I'm working with a customer who have system which has its own concept of tenant and a tenancy on top of Azure with Active Directory, with Office 365.
Okay. So, yeah, so if you untitled,
Experts, yeah, experts, yeah, okay. Okay, no, thank you for the correction. Password and that camera is speaking it up.
I'll change it, yeah. It's that ship sail now, isn't it? Okay, so what I'm trying to show you now is the error you get if you do try and do it. So yeah, the error you get if you try and use a VNet, which is, it's this error. So saying that it needs to be existing for the VNet, but it's not very clear if you're not sure how Azure works, or if you're not sure of the policies and things like that. So yeah, that's what you get to. But this takes a bit of time to go through, so I'm not going to let that load, but that's basically the screen to go through to deploy that. So optimizing. So this is kind of what the talk was more about. Everyone's gone over the first part of it. Is when you look at optimization, typically what people look at is trying to make it cost less and perform better. And sometimes, one goes up, one goes down. As you expect, you can't expect the world and not pay for it. Other people often do. But luckily, there are some things that you can do which can save you money and can also give you a bit better performance and scalability as well. So yeah, we've talked about the multi-session stuff, how that can save you money running Windows 10 multi-session because you don't need one VM per user. If you run on the desktop VDI environment, that can be expensive. You've got 1,000 users, 1,000 VMs, 1,000 OSs, and then those OSs need, especially on Windows, need compute power outside the user information, user usage. So that can already save money just by using this. But there are some other ways as well. So one of the other slides mentioned that there's really good support here for Office 365, specifically for this slide, OneDrive. So if you've got 1,000 users that are logging on to your environment, so you've got 10, 15, 20 servers, 1,000 users logging on, what you might have, if you're not using roaming profiles, is all those users log on. Any user could get on any machine, so all user profiles at some point could be stored on all hosts if you're not using roaming profiles. Windows 10, which is one of the advantages of using Windows 10 over a server OS, because it's desktop, has really good integration and group policy settings for OneDrive as well. So if you're running VMs which run managed disks, premium SSD, and you're looking at storing the user profile on there and all the information on there, that can get quite expensive. OneDrive, you get like 5 gig free from there. If you're using 365, you can get like a terabyte. It goes up more the more you pay them, basically, for your license. But you can configure the server operating system, the desktop operating system, to synchronize your user profile with OneDrive folders on there. So you can have some of your information stored in OneDrive for free. And if you've got 1,000 users using even 5 gig each, it's a lot of information, a lot of data that you don't have to pay for on the operating system of those machines. So yeah, there's some good policies you can do here to do that. And also sync some of your user folders that you choose from the profile into OneDrive, which are good for backups. If you've got a documents folder that most people save all the stuff into, then it's good to have that. It's good to have that backed up somewhere else. And OneDrive with this includes single sign-on as well if you use domain. Yes. You can use Intune, yeah. So the question then of how do you apply group policy? That it all depends. So you're using base images for this VM, for this desktop. So if you want your image to have these things pre-configured already, then you can do that. For bigger setups, you might want to make updates to as they're online. Then yeah, Intune or any mobile device management tool can do that for you as well.
Sorry, is it fair to say
Yeah.
Enterprise who is trying to replace Citrix?
Yeah, so the question there was, is this a good solution for somebody who wants to have a cloud-first offering rather than using just to get off Citrix platform?
Let's say a development house of 20 people.
Yeah. I think so. Yeah.
I would disagree a bit because you have this running applications in there. Where your applications were HTML5, that you have to install, then you don't need to run anything in the data center. You run locally, so you use some local CPU. You're not paying Microsoft to use that CPU. So if you're cloud first, then you don't need a remote desktop.
But maybe you don't want to spend money on desktop.
So I think
So you have like a
think on it.
terminal or
300-400 quid, and then you buy a laptop that costs $800,000.
And the 365 and the OneDrive synchronization, what are you synchronizing it with? Or
User profile folders.
with where?
So it's when you yeah, so I mean you could have your profile stored somewhere else. But when you log on and go to see users, you're going to see it in there as you go through. So what you do, we'll go back to that slide in a minute, is, there's a group policy there. So the one that's highlighted is actually the one I was talking about. So you can tell it to synchronize folders between your local user data and OneDrive. Because if you're using non-persistent location for your remote location for your user profiles, then typically that's going to be HA anyway, so if a host dies, you're not going to lose your data. But having that synced to OneDrive just gives you that extra, your data's going to be there. So that can be a really good way to save money by using OneDrive tied in with it. And because if you're logging on with a domain user, that can automatically authenticate with OneDrive. So when you log on, you see it as in your network shares, and so you don't even have to configure anything. You just use that as your drive if you wanted to. That comes with some education to the users as well, but you can map drives to there as well. So the next part is FS Logics. Has anyone used this before? Doesn't work. Okay. When did you try it? Right. Okay. So FS Logics used to be a partner of Microsoft. Then they bought them out. So Microsoft now own FS Logics. And FS Logics is it's a company that does non-persistent Windows computing environments. So what that means, it's trying to abstract part of the kind of the user information or user data from the virtual machine to make scaling easier, so you're not dependent on things being stored on individual machines. Another machine can spin up and access that data without having to replicate data to it. And it just takes a lot. So anytime you're trying to scale, having as many things abstracted from the OS is better, because when you try and build something up new and scale new ones out, it's a quicker time to do that, because you basically just boot up a blank OS that has this configuration on there that says this is where you need to look for. So what that also does as well, though, it can improve logon times as well, because you're not waiting for your data to actually be fully loaded on there, because it's a remote virtual profile disk somewhere. And a lot of time it can be cheaper as well. So if you're running SSD drives on the server, for your user profile data, that could be quite expensive. So you can configure using FS Logics, you can configure the profiles to be stored somewhere different. So it's an SMB share that you specify for that, and that gives your user profile disks. Like if you've used remote desktop services, how you specify that in there, this is similar to that. So you can use Azure file storage, you can use Azure blob storage, depending on what kind of data users have. Probably going to be files rather than blob, but if they're using a lot of media services, maybe blob would be better for that. How does this authenticate?
Yeah.
So what you need to do, this isn't actually in the slides, but if you need to, when you do this, first off, If I was doing it just for me, I would log onto a server. I would create this file share in Azure. And then on this server host, if I was doing it manually, I would open CMD and do a kind of change permissions on there with icals for it, and give that user access to that virtual hard disk.
And if you're doing it like for multiple users, because you basically can't mount your file share for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
From GPO, and you do it like your each program.
Yeah.
Also the GPO?
So you can do GPO, yeah. So this is shown here in the registry just as a visual for it. Any group policy is it's a user-friendly front end, right, for changing stuff like this. So any group policy change you make changes the registry. So profile information you can change in group policy for it. So you can set that so it's variable to that user.
Question. So, is it really like in the future eventually you'll be able to inject the application with the run, for example, remove all the version?
That's coming. But yes, is the short answer. Yeah. So what this is doing is kind of injecting the user data for it, just the profile data on there. Let's see.
If it's fair to compare to like that thin app from VMware.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's the next part of it. Is I've called it app injection. That's probably not the right word for it. But the way with FSLogix, the way the storage profile keeps the user information away from the server, away from the operating system, and just accesses it so it can be referenced by that server. They are working on doing that with applications as well. Because one of the problems you sometimes have, especially with large environments, is if you have people who use Power BI, and you have people who use Office, and you have people who use Visual Studio, and many different applications, but only this team uses these small group, and this team uses these, and this team uses these, is because of the space and resource on the server, if you just have one big pool of servers, and you have to install all those applications on there, that uses a lot of resource, because you might not need to have everything installed on all machines. So what people do is they create pools of servers. So you have a small group of pools, that's for your data scientists, which might have data scientist tools on there, might have like GPU and things like that in there. You create another pool for Office users, or you could do, so that just have those applications on there, and you create another pool for these applications. So that users only log on to the ones that they need to log on to, and has it on there. So you don't need to have everything installed and everything. And so, yeah. Power. Critically low.
What's the more powerful way to it's like the timer started. What power supply do you need?
USB-C. Yeah. That was good. That was full before I started. Been talking for too long. Luckily, we're all nearly through because it's 8:10 now anyway. So I'll quickly go through this anyway, just in case it does die. So, yeah, good spot that. So yeah, the application side is coming as well, where the application is kind of virtually mounted within there and kind of gets everything it needs without having it installed locally. To the end user, it feels like it is. It will be there. Will, thank you.
Was that already working with FSLogix before? Or is that just
Thank you.
now the acquisition of Microsoft and then
So FSLogix is, in the past, if you're doing it, you install an agent on the machine, which gives you the FSLogix options, stuff like that on there. So it's been around for a while. Now Microsoft have bought it out. They're doing a lot more work with it for this reason, to try and make it a better platform for users. One of the good things with it as well is, again, it's a really bad place, this. So if anyone's used VDI before and they tried to do a Teams call, anyone done it? No? It can be pretty bad. And the reason for it is... Sorry? It's, yeah. So what you would have, if we use these boxes as things, so this box is end user 1, top box is the VDI environment, and then end user 2, this is them and that's their VDI. So these two people speaking on Teams over VDI, it goes from here to here to here to here, which adds latency onto that as well. Both visual and audio, and sometimes the audio can fall out of sync with visual. What they've done with the Windows Virtual Desktop is when you now set this up using Windows Virtual Desktop, using Teams, it will open up a direct link between this user and this user, even though... Yes, so this isn't specifically just for Windows Desktop. They have, so Citrix, Citrix does this, I'm pretty sure, as well. Yeah. But yeah, so this is by no means IP for just for...
Is it something that they have improved specifically for Windows Visual Desktop, or is the same stance as was in Windows 10?
They have made improvements for it as well. Yeah, specifically, I'm not sure what, but they did a talk about this at Ignite. I wasn't there, I just watched one of the recordings. And they said they are working on improving that specifically as well. Yeah. So it opens a direct connection between this user and this user, rather than going all the way through.
Is this GA already?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I tried this one.
Okay. Do you use, it might be part of Ethic Logics maybe, do you use that on there as well? Yeah. I'll find out exactly what triggers it. Yeah. We'll put it on the meetup group, but it's I know it's available because we talked about it at Ignite for it. Comment was what to say then, but yeah, so the communication goes direct between the two of them. I'll find the answer to that out though, and I'll stick it on the meetup page maybe. So yeah, that's all quite cool. We saw this slide before to do the remote profiles and the OneDrive stuff. So I put this on a separate slide. I mentioned at the start of it because what we talked about so far with performance, has anyone used Azure NetApp files? No. It's quite new. You need to request that they add your subscription to it to use for it. It's an enterprise grade SMB and NFS. So file share that you can use, giving better performance, considerably better performance than the general storage you get in Azure files.
Do you have to request access?
Yes.
Why?
It's not generally available within the Azure portal at the moment. So they basically need to, so you can go through, so if you go through the portal, you'll see it, but they need to allow your subscription in.
So it's not GA?
No. You do need to contact them to do it. If you contact them, they'll get back to you. And yeah, so you'll see it in the portal, but yeah, they need to authorize your subscription, and you need to register a resource provider for NetApp as well.
Is that like a hardware appliance from them somewhere in the data center? Or is it just
No, so the Azure NetApp files is NetApp storage. It's on there. Yeah, it's NetApp storage. It's on there. It's not too bad. I mean, it's more, that's why I put this separately, right? Because what we've talked about so far, a lot of things we talked about is lower costs and make things better at the same time. This will make it faster, but it's not going to be a lower cost. It's not daft money. It's similar to Ultra SSD costs, but you get more performance. Well, it depends on the slides that you see. I've seen slides from one of the guys who works on the product team, and that makes it look a lot better. Up to 4.5 gig per second on the disk. The way Azure Files works, though, as NetApp Files works, is you create a storage pool when you first set this up, and you then, which you pay for, so it's stick provisions for you. When in payment-wise, it's not you pay for what you use. You say, I want this, and you pay for that. The more space you have, similar to virtual disks, managed disks, the more you have, the more IOPS and throughput you get. So you want more performance, you've got to buy more for it. So yeah, this is separate just because it kind of does cost more money. You'll see some slides that will say it will be cheaper than Azure storage. But
use case you see people using Ultra SSD or this for Windows Virtual Desktop?
so this is your NetApp files.
People actually making use case of it?
Yeah. So it's for disk intensive operations, right? Because it's low latency, high performance, high throughput.
I mean, like general
what I see this for, because Windows Virtual Desktop is relatively new to BGA, and you need to request access to this. Although we're talking now about VDI environments, I've seen this used well for database platforms that need that throughput on the disks. Sometimes you can hit limits on Azure VMs for stuff like disk cache, and for reads, writes, throughput, and you need to grow to a silly size, which costs a lot of money to get any kind of throughput for it. Azure NetApps, the throughput exceeds what you get with Azure Storage. So it's disk-intensive workloads, very disk-intensive workloads that you need low latency and high throughput for. So I put this on for against Windows Virtual Desktop. I see this more with databases, but if your users do need disk-intensive machines, like graphic design, for example, data scientists maybe, then this is an option on there as well. Because this is, so it's a, I know no one said they used it before, so it's enterprise-grade storage within Azure. It is a NetApp storage unit, but to configure it, you don't need to have any NetApp experience at all. It's all done through Azure. You don't pay NetApp, you pay Azure. So even the product team that do this will say it shouldn't really be called Azure NetApp files. It should be called Azure Enterprise files, because you're paying Microsoft. It's just an Azure storage unit, a NetApp storage unit, sorry, under the covers. And yeah, it can cost more. You basically get a chunk of disk you want, and you can create storage blocks within that pool when you create it. You can expand it really quickly and easily as well. So you can automate because it comes with, the throughput comes with the size of the storage pool you use. So if you need to have a high throughput amount during the day, and you only use 10 gig of space, you can increase that storage pool to a terabyte to get the throughput, even though you're only using 10 gig, and then at the end of the day, shrink it back down again. All online operations. And quick as well. So, if you need to have that disk throughput high at certain times, you can go up and down quite quickly. I think it's more for databases, or for that kind of disk I/O work, but, graphic designers, data scientists. Sorry, what was that?
You know, the Intel Optane?
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. I was going to say not that I'm aware of. I'm not sure. I don't know. But yeah, so if you're using remote storage for user profile disks, if you are using remote storage, you're going to be limited to the performance you can get. Azure files, Azure blob storage. It's good to have that non-persistence in a way, but it's not built for performance, right? I mean, it can be quick, but it's not there as a performance storage unit, whereas this is, if you want to do it. It's native for, doesn't say this, but it's, oh no, it does, yeah, native for Azure Active Directory domain services, and on-prem as well. So when you're using this, you create your file share, and you can give access to Azure AD so that users can authenticate against that. Azure AD or on-prem AD. And this is the part where you grant access to your user profile disks for each user. So potentially, I actually got this slide from a friend of mine who works on the NetApp product team. What that is so it works with Active Directory domain services. It doesn't have to be Azure Active Directory.
So, but if it's Active Directory domain services, it's just Azure one or like normal one?
It works for on-prem and Azure AD, yes. Yeah, it works for both. So that doesn't mean not Azure AD. That just means it works for AD, not necessarily in Azure, because it's a platform you get in.
It's like a proper...
Yes. Yeah. This is authentication in there. So, if your users have requirements that need, if they do absolutely smash the disk when they're doing their operations, this is potentially a good option to use for it. As the slide says, works with Citrix as well, so we're just talking about Azure at the moment, Windows Virtual Desktop, but it does work with both. So yeah, consider that. The docs page from Microsoft are pretty good at describing how you need to do that if you do need to do it. Again, that works well with FS Logics to store your disks on there. So yeah, separate consideration. Might cost you more on the other options, but will make performance better. Login times will be faster. It's whether you care that much about it to pay the money for it, depending on what your users do. So we're going well at the end. So I would say it's always good to have some kind of takeaways from things rather than just me talking for an hour. I'd say if you're using, that's not supposed to be VDI, consider Windows Virtual Desktop if you're looking at VDI. It takes all the management of servers away. There's no more patching, there's potentially no costs that you pay for the OS, depending on how you get licenses. SQL doesn't need to be patched. It takes a lot of that pain away, and all you pay for is your compute resources that you have for your hosts. And if you do use remote storage, is that as well. But it takes a lot of that management and also cost of it away.
Quick question, sorry, about patching.
Mm-hmm.
So if we have a dozen Windows 10 desktops,
Yeah.
they're not downloading updates, they're patched background, or how is that working?
So Windows updates are,
When my user logs in,
yeah.
are they going to see we have half a dozen updates, or is it done in the background?
So it depends on how you get that configured, doesn't it? So the updates are an OS level setting. So what you typically do with any,
It's the same as a
yeah, absolutely, yeah. Well, what I would do is you update the image periodically.
it's not already manual.
To the image, of course, yes. Yeah. So this is based on a single source image, but this is to the session hosts effectively, rather than the gateway, broker, SQL Server, or the infrastructure level.
If I set up a server in Azure,
Yeah.
it's automatically patched.
You can have auto patching on there as well. It's how you configure it. You configure how you want it to be patched. Your server in Azure's only patched because that's what the default template says to do, is set update at this time. It depends on what image you use for that, because those settings are part of the image. If you wanted to have that on there, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it depends on when your users access it. If it's only 9 to 5, then you can do that anytime, can't you, out of hours. You can download it, the agent. Google it, yeah. You can download it and install it. It's part of Microsoft now, so they make it quite easy to.
Yeah, when they took the mobile, it sort of went away, you couldn't get it, so you get it now.
Yeah. So yeah, you can download FS Logics through Microsoft. So yeah, consider Windows Virtual Desktop. It's going to save you time. It might save you money. It might make your life easier. If you're going to do it though, use FS Logics. You want to abstract that user data from the virtual machines. Keeps the images smaller, keeps them easy to manage, keeps them cheaper, and also makes scaling easier to do as well. So definitely use this, the FS Logic, if you're going to use this. And if you do need a load of disk throughput, then Azure NetApp Files is what you want for that. Any more questions?
How does it scale those session hosts? Is it based on user numbers, or is it based on some other metrics?
So yes, you can set it to be more certain numbers at certain times a day if you want to. So I've just done a proposal for a client who wanted 1,000 users on there at peak times, and they went through.
You wouldn't do that. I mean, you could do that with RDS in IS with some code.
The exact same thing as that.
It's the same thing.
Yeah. So you can automate it all.
There's no built-in stuff behind the scenes now with WVD that does all that for you.
Like elasticity.
Yeah, so you need to configure the options for scale up and scale down at certain times. The issue I've got with that is it's not, you put figures together for it, but it's not always realistic in the real world, because if you've got 10 machines and you've got 10 people logged onto each of them, and you say, at this time I want to downgrade servers, but it's not going to turn them off if someone's logged on. So loads of people log off, but you've got one logged on for every single server. You're not going to downgrade them because someone's logged on there already, unless you set things like log off after disconnect time, but if they're active on each one, that's never going to scale down. So you can set the scale options on there to go up and down, but it's never going to be an exact science for it. It's going to be, it depends on user activity as well.
I mean, that's really important. I'm not sure if I fully understood your question or if we're on the same wavelength, but if I say I want enough for 1,000 users, am I going to be paying for 1,000 users even if on a Sunday I only have 20?
No, you pay for compute costs of the hosts that are spun up.
So it's not going to be elastic. It's reserved, essentially.
So if you pay for the VMs that get spun up. So if you've got 1,000 users during the day, then we have before 1,000 users 32 VMs. It said. So you pay for those 32 VMs.
And then they're static. I mean, they're going to be there.
Yeah, but you can spin that down, scale that down at hours that are not as busy.
But it won't dynamically.
You can
do some
use.
scripts to increase the
Yeah.
then keep people off and say, I'd like to know reduce it once over the weekend. Let them launch and say,
But if I have a web app, right, and I'm telling this pizza and it's Super Bowl, it'll just blow out another 1,000 web servers for me. So, and then after the Super Bowl, it'll put it back
you
down.
can't do that, right? It's not going to be like next XXX. It's going to involve a fair bit of scripts.
So you'll have to like,
Yeah.
Yeah, the trouble is when you scale down the session times,
yeah,
you can't just kick someone off a session, one session, and just stick them on another one.
right, because it's persistent.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't want to do it manually. You want to script it. You want to automate it because manual, like, what's the point being is your.
Oh, the other question. How many production deployments have you done and have you been doing? Like, how many users? Yeah, some numbers, just have an idea.
How many production ones do I have running at the moment?
Yeah.
One.
Do you know people that have many?
So the thing with this, it's only been released in September.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to use it. I've got a proposal out which clients agreed for up to 1,000 users at peak times. So if people come to me and say they want to have a VDI environment and they want to go to Azure, I'll recommend this rather than hand-rolling RDS environments, hand-rolling Citrix. Citrix Cloud, obviously in Azure is an offering as well. But I'd say keep it here because we do all of our rollouts with infrastructure as code, and this is easy to template up.
My concern is like, well, it just came GA November. It was meant to come in January, I think, February or something. And before I did it, I tried to use it recently. I felt thought it'd be better-ish.
Yeah. Yes, yeah.
It made me feel like, God.
It's like everything in Azure, isn't it? So, I mean, it is a Citrix killer. That's what this is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.